Good evening. Welcome to the December 9th hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Our first application on the evening is of Mary E. McKay and Patrick H. O'Brien, the trustees of 35 Doctors Hill Drive. Maybe they are trustees and they reside at 35 Doctors Hill Drive in Situate, requesting a special permit pursuant to Section 610.2B of the Situate zoning bylaw to allow the creation of 3 single-family lots on the property located at Laurelwood Drive. Thank you. How are you?
Very good, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the plan?
My name is Paul Marabito from Ross Engineering Company. We're representing the owners and the applicants for this project. The reason we're here this evening is they own approximately 12 acres of land, and we're proposing to create five single-family house lots. 3 of them are what is known as 50-foot lots, where they have 50 feet of frontage. And this plan is lot 1, 2, and 5. These are the 3 lots we're asking for the zoning board to approve this evening. The property that they own is this big rectangle plus this small sliver of land in the middle. The frontage for these lots would be off of Laurelwood Drive, which is an existing way. There's a small wetland to the back of lot 3. A small portion comes on to lot 5. This wetland line was reviewed by the Conservation Commission's agent, and it was approved under an RDA by the Commission this past Monday evening. The lots in question, these 3 lots have to be at least 80,000 square feet of upland. This lot here is 87,600 square feet. It's all upland. Likewise, lot 2 has 100,000 square feet of upland. And lot 5 has 87,100 square feet of upland. One of the requirements of the zoning bylaw is if the applicant applies for a 50-foot lot, they can only put a single-family dwelling on these lots. Even though they have 80,000 plus square feet of land or cannot go a 2-family dwelling. These are large lots in the neighborhood. They're all just over 2 acres of land. We have been purchased on the property. We have surveyed it, and we have been to the Conservation Commission, and this confirmed, and we're here this evening before the zoning board. Once this plan is approved by the board, we will file it with the planning board and ask them to approve the lot line so the plan could be recorded in the registry of deeds. The septic systems would be approved by the Board of Health, and the stormwater designs of each individual lot, all 5 lots would be approved by the planning board. The lots will be serviced by town water. They'll have their own septic systems, and they'll be served by electric and gas. There's also a requirement that the deeds in these 3 lots have a restriction in them, saying that they can never be further subdivided. So once these lots are approved, these will be the shape of the lots in perpetuity. I think with that, I'll have my presentation and answer questions the board may have.
Okay. You want to get started?
Yeah, I mean, did you want to voice any of the concerns of the planning board, or did you want to?
Let's do us. I don't know. You want to do the planning board first?
I mean, so those are the majority of my concerns, I think.
Would you mind doing that?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we did receive a memo from the planning board. That's from Ann Burbine, the chair. That was dated December 17, 2019. And I've highlighted some of her concerns. One of the things that she brought up is that when the definitive subdivision was approved back in 1998, it was her understanding, and I think it's the planning board's and the planning department's understanding, that there'd be no further subdivision of the lots shown on the plan.
What I wasn't clear on from her memo, though, is she referring to a subdivision of these lots or a subdivision of lots across the street?
Right, so it looks like there was some across the street,
Right.
but then there was information that the gentleman, Mr. McKay,
Yep.
his name was on the application as well.
Right.
Whether those lots, I don't know, I haven't seen that plan, that's the thing.
So, yeah, give us some on this.
When the Laurelwood subdivision was approved, and Russ Engineering also prepared that subdivision plan, you have plans showing that there's two parcels that comprise all of this. One is this big rectangle, which they just supported in the last year. This property was never part of the Laurelwood subdivision, neither was this parcel. This parcel used to be combined with this existing dwelling here, which is Mr. McKay's former residence. After the subdivision was approved, what he did was to put his house on a 1 acre lot, and he also carved out this lot here, which was going on the stone wall in this area here. So this property, the only land that abutted Laurelwood Drive at the time was from here over. And this land had already been divided off in the Form A process. She refers to a subdivision. This is not a subdivision. This is an A&R plan, which is a division of land. The subdivision control law is very clear. They make a very clear distinction between what a subdivision is and what a subdivision is not. This is not a subdivision of property. It's a division under Chapter 41.
Just to clarify, Paul, the portion, the lot, not the large rectangular portion, but the other portion that's oddly shaped, was once part of the encompassed area,
Yes,
which has an existing dwelling on it.
this
That
piece
portion.
here was part of this.
And that was subdivided as part of the Laurelwood subdivision, or after the Laurelwood subdivision was
The
done?
subdivision was sold, and that plan, I think you have that plan.
Do
Is that the
Plan.
Exhibit A,
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
was
the,
done well after the subdivision.
2011?
The subdivision was approved, I think, in 1997. This plan was approved in 2011.
all right, so the Lot A, the division of the lot, creating Lot A and Lot B,
Right.
upon Lot A is the existing dwelling. Lot B being created is rather odd-shaped, but contains over 40,000 square feet
It's a buildable
and has
lot.
a portion of it which has the lot width necessary to build. There's only a small portion of it that can be built upon, but it is,
Yes, we show the setback lines on that?
right, the setback lines, I think the portion to the northeast of the existing dwelling would be a difficult spot to develop, but large enough to put a small house. But
correct.
certainly the larger portion to the south of the existing dwelling is sufficient for a building.
Correct.
And that creation of Lot B is completely separate from the development of Laurel Woods,
That's correct.
other than when Laurel Woods Drive was put in, that lot was created fronting Laurel Woods, whereas prior to Laurel Woods, it fronted on First Parish.
Right, Lot A and B always had its frontage on Laurelwood Drive. Laurelwood Drive was a separate house lot. It had 100 feet of lot width, which David McKay owned, and he sold that to the developer, so they would have access then to the land in Situate and the rest in Norwell.
But Laurel Wood Drive was put in as part of of the subdivision.
That's correct.
So the McKay lot that we're talking about fronted on First Parish
That's correct.
prior to the creation of Laurelwood Drive.
Yes, that's correct.
With the creation of Laurelwood Drive, it fronts on both First Parish and Laurelwood.
That's correct.
And your application takes advantage of the fact that the newly created Lot B fronts on Laurelwood Drive with sufficient frontage to create the necessary frontage for your access to the back lot with 5 lots.
That's correct.
Okay?
And my last, did you have a chance to, did you receive the planning board's memo? You did not receive a copy of it?
No.
Okay. Do we,
I can give it to him.
in the letter, Ms. Burbine refers to the planning board endorsing a Form A in 2011 for Lot B. Is she talking about an A and R plan? Which is an A and R plan.
That's Exhibit A.
Yeah.
So they endorsed it after it was,
Yeah, so, and she says, thus the planning, right. So, this first issue that you've raised from the memo, where I had some trouble in the full day that we've had to review it, was the memo makes it seem like there's a no further subdivision restriction, but I think the no further subdivision restriction is on lots across the street and not on these lots. And I think that the inference that maybe the memo gives that there's a restriction on these lots that we're being asked to now go back on is not accurate. Does that make sense? I'm more asking than telling.
Yeah, I mean, without seeing that subdivision plan, I was just going,
The other subdivision
the one
plan.
that's referenced from 98 from Tilden Corporation.
Well, I think if there was a restriction on
Then
these
this
lots, it
wasn't-
would appear on this plan,
And then probably this wouldn't have been
and
formed.
then that wouldn't have happened. I think,
well, and I would rely on Paul's professional experience and licensure to identify if this parcel should not be subdivided.
yeah, and there would be a record plan that would say it wouldn't if this was part of it, and there isn't. And I actually poked around just a little bit in a little bit of time that I had. I don't believe that these lots are subject to the restriction that was put in place across the street.
I agree. The reason being is, the land area that's in front of you this evening was never part of the land of the Laurelwood subdivision. It was.
It looks like it was taken by,
Right.
It
Lot-
benefits with the construction of Laurelwood.
It
but
does,
But
yes.
but it was not
No.
part of the
Again, lot-
development.
Lot A and B was the McKay homestead back in 1996 when the subdivision was submitted to the town of Situate. The land you see here in the back, that was shown as David McKay as owner, he was in the court system to acquire title for that for himself and his family. That was the subject of the judgment that was issued about a year and a half ago, which you have a copy of. Instead of a deed on Exhibit B, we show the parcel that was subject to that judgment. And I gave you a copy of the judgment that was recorded in deed book 50439, page 115. And if you note, on the top of this big rectangle that he was claiming ownership to, there was an owner that asserted that they claimed that they own 2 acres of land somewhere in this
and
area.
he amended his complaint,
And they,
took that off, and then just acquired the bottom portion.
exactly. And that was a year and a half ago, but at the time the subdivision was submitted, he didn't have title to that property, which is a larger portion of that. So again, the comments in my opinion, from the planning board are not accurate. They aren't on point, and because none of the land that's in front of you this evening was part of that subdivision. I would also further state that, again, where that land was not part of the subdivision, that land that's before you this evening does have frontage on a way that was approved under the subdivision control law, which allows it to be divided into house lots using the frontage on that way that was approved under the subdivision control law. I'm not sure if they understand.
That's what I see. I was caught off guard by the memo. There's no further subdivision over here. does not mean no further subdivision over here.
It isn't
And
a
you can't, and you
subdivision.
can't assert because the way goes through with no further subdivision that all land that it abuts.
No,
Cannot
that's
be
not,
subdivided.
that's
That-
not the way it works.
No, it doesn't.
I guess, should we maybe move on to the second paragraph of the letter, of the memo, which refers to,
The easement?
well, I guess that's within that first paragraph?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what she's getting at there either.
I think what she's saying is that there was an easement, when the easement was granted, the person that granted the easement had deeded the property a month before.
Person that granted which easement? The easement for the road?
Yeah. So the easement to Dave Simone Properties granted an easement on December 8th. Which I think they included. So December 8th, they grant, that Simone Properties gives them an easement.
Is she questioning, what is she questioning? Why are we concerned with an easement?
I think what they were what they were pointing out is that it's not a public way, so it's a private way.
Doesn't need to be a public way. It's a private way shown on a plan. There's a,
A way shown on the plan.
yeah.
It's also a way approved under the subdivision control law.
Yeah,
Which allows you to divide land off of it through the A&R process,
yeah.
which is what this plan shows.
I didn't have the opportunity to discuss this with the chair of the planning board, which I would have had we received this earlier, and I don't fault the planning board for that. I'm sure that they are as busy as we are with matters that are before them and other matters. But the first paragraph of this letter seems to be a little bit of just throwing the kitchen sink at this application to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't find the validity in it. It confused me, it made me ponder, but the representations that have been made so far, I'm comfortable with, and I don't see.
And mainly, I'm bringing these up just for
Of course, no, we
conversation.
need to. We're not
it's-
gonna, we get a memo
can't-
from the planning board and we're not gonna not talk about it 100%. But I just wish there was a little more to this one.
I understand what they're saying here in the letter. The problem is, the land before you was never land shown on the subdivision plan. It was never part of it.
It seems as though she's questioning the validity of the easement that someone has and not the validity of the easement that the applicant has, which might be a valid argument between the grantor and the grantee of that easement, but I'm not sure it's something we're concerned, actually, I'm pretty sure it isn't something we're concerned with here.
Not with this application.
Yeah, I know a little bit about easements. Yeah. After that, she goes into the dissolution of an entity, which is not our applicant,
Correct.
which I still didn't follow. And then back into the not contemplating additional subdivision across the street.
You can't not contemplate when the land exists. The potential is always there.
To me, that was sort of like saying, oh, well, we approved your 40B over here because we didn't think you were going to do any more 40Bs. Like, it's,
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you don't own the land, you can't control it.
it is.
And if it was not part of the application or
Mr. Chairman?
encumbered,
Yes.
I just read what she wrote about the easement.
Yeah,
What she's referring to, the area in gray on the plan,
yes,
that is the layout for Laurelwood Drive.
yes.
Laurelwood Drive is a private way. It has not been accepted by the town of Situate to this point. So when Mr. McKay decided that he wanted to divide his property, not subdivide, but he wanted to divide it up into parcel A and parcel B, case law says that, it says two things. If you have frontage on a way that was approved under the subdivision control law, which Laurelwood Drive is, then you can use that frontage to divide your property. However, if it's a private way, then you have to get permission from the person who owns the fee in that portion of Laurelwood Drive. At the time in 2011, that was Mr. Simeone. Hornberger Associates represented the McKays at the time of the creation of parcel A and B. And they did in fact get written permission from Simeone to allow the McKay to use Laurelwood Drive for legal frontage. So in that respect, parcel A and B are legal. They lawfully use the frontage on Laurelwood Drive for the creation of those two parcels. The parcel she talks about being on the other side of the road, EM Laurelwood, those parcels are down in here. This is EM Laurelwood Drive. So what's happening is there's a stormwater basin. There's a stormwater basin in this area here, but there's lots on this side. And the only way to get to them is by crossing the conservation restriction area. There were 3 lots in there. We had a common driveway going across it, and the zoning board approved that. And then for whatever reason, the planning board wouldn't allow it. So these 3 lots are still unbuilt. The reason is, there's a conservation restriction in here, which Conservation Commission required. Apparently that has never been recorded in the registry. So the person who bought these sought to come in through an abutters property by purchasing some of it. That opportunity fell through, and these 3 lots still sit here today. I don't know if they'll ever be developed. We actually did perk test on those lots, and we had septic system plans designed, but that conservation restriction was preventing physical access from Laurelwood Drive. They've got the legal frontage. Those lots were shown on the subdivision plan, but that conservation restriction is a impediment to get into the back of the lots. So again, just reading this first paragraph, or the second paragraph, that's what that easement's talking about.
When the easement was granted by Simeone to McKay in 2011 or thereabouts, was it a restrictive easement allowing the use of Laurelwood Drive only for this divided land and not to be future subdivided?
I don't believe so, because the only land he owned at the time was parcel A and B. Mr. McKay did not own that larger parcel, and that was the subject of that judgment.
Right, but you're referencing an easement that allowed A and B to be divided
Right.
to create A and B.
Mhm.
And we don't have that easement before us, or the wording of that easement, so we don't know whether there was anything in that easement that suggested limitations on what was granted. Is that a fair legal?
It's, what's that?
They did, I think they submitted it, the planning board sent the easement.
They included the easement in their memo?
Is there easement in there? That's it.
I think it's before the assessor card.
Yeah.
So they included the deed and the easement.
So we don't have any of this, so there's nothing.
We do have a granted
Okay.
easement. Yeah, there's no restrictions, and they're creating a private way. And it's a private way that, when you create a private way, it's very difficult to prevent anyone who abuts the private way
I accept that.
to use it. Whether, and again, I feel that she's raised a private issue. Then we get into some drainage questions, which are, at least in my opinion, not before us.
No?
Right.
No, this is the 50-foot frontage application before us is purely one of
610.2B, yeah.
Dimensional, period.
One of the most simple decisions we make, in my opinion. And then, she gets into 950.3, which are the standards for granting a special permit.
In fact, 20.
But to be honest, I don't think, is this a special permit application? It's not. Isn't it a finding that it complies with 610.2?
Special permit.
Is it a special permit?
Yep.
By a special permit, yes. Where the last paragraph bothers me is it seems to be a last-ditch effort to have us not approve the lots. For the use or structure, there's not an application for use or structure before us. That the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood, well, we're not, a use is not before us, but it's a residential neighborhood, and can only be a residential use, so I would argue that it doesn't. That there will not be an undue nuisance, we have a very large lot that is going to be
Double.
basically limiting itself as to density.
Adequate and appropriate facilities will have to, she references the access of water, but the building commissioner can't issue a building permit unless proof of adequate and appropriate
Yeah.
facilities are stated by
Stormwater, right?
Board of, Board of Health.
Yeah.
So all of those things come after us.
And then, Bob, in this instance, they'd be subject to stormwater permits?
Possibly. Again, you'd have to look at lot disturbance as a percentage of total. You'd have to look at impervious as a percentage of total. That would be entirely up to the planning board to decide, and then having decided to monitor the engineering to make sure it complied.
Well, and I've always taken the position that 50-foot frontage lots were designed to access large parcels of land with a reduced density that were otherwise not available except through this kind of relief. The idea of a large farm parcel with a house on the main road and a parcel behind, 50-foot frontage to access the parcel behind. This meets all of those.
We regularly
Conceptual
hear
ideas.
from other town boards and citizens looking for ways to prevent, for lack of a better word, density. And this applicant is looking to use a portion of the code that requires some of the least dense use of acreage possible
Right.
under our code.
I'm
And
sure there's a way to lay out a road in here and get more lots.
of course there is. Oh, we know, look at the next applicant.
Right.
And, the idea that this would somehow overburden Laurelwood Drive, 5 more houses, just doesn't work for me. I'm familiar with some overburdening cases. First, I'm not sure how that's a concern of the planning board or our board. That would be a concern of the other house lots that are on Laurelwood and have rights in the easement. But that's not an overburdening. I've seen overburdening before, adding 5 house lots where there is, 200-ish feet of frontage on a pretty well laid out private road that's not gonna be an overburdening in,
350.
in any court in Massachusetts that I'm familiar with, and I've read more than the average number of overburdening cases.
As I stated earlier, those lots can only be used for a single-family home.
Yeah, I see.
Can't be further subdivided.
Right.
To me, this is the form of subdivision that Situate should be championing at the present moment.
Especially where it's the West End and we're looking at, acre lots,
Right. 2 acre lots.
No, but acre lots is the.
Oh, right,
the zone-
as a,
the
right.
zoning,
We're
whereas
looking at these lots as opposed to
as-
acre lots.
in other areas where we have, 10,000 foot
2
lots.
acres.
Right.
This is 1 acre lots, so we're
That are
creating 2
becoming
acre
even
lots. So it's
bigger.
as big as you can.
even if I did agree with, and even if I was against this development, which clearly I'm not, it meets the requirements of 610.2B.
That's where it comes down to. I don't think this is where they're not looking for any relief from the zoning. They're looking to apply the zoning.
Yeah. In a
The bylaw that
provision
was
that I think
created to do
benefits the
exactly
town.
this. If they were looking for relief from zoning, then we can say, well, you know, you're looking for relief, you can get elsewhere, you know, look.
We have other
We don't
considerations.
have any of these considerations here.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, we've been working with the owners on this for a while. When they first approached us, and when it was before the court system, we were asked to lay out a plan showing the maximum use of the property. On the back of the board, I can show you a plan we submitted to them showing a subdivision with a fairly short road, 450 feet, with 10 house lots, plus a separate lot for the drainage. They've also had interest in it from other people to buy the land to develop it for much higher density. The owners have decided on their own, they do not want to see a large density. That's why they're foregoing that, and they want to see only 5 house lots. We've gone back and forth on it, and it was their decision to limit this to 5 very large house lots without a subdivision road.
I live in a subdivision with 5 house lots. It's a subdivision. It's a lot less land than this one will.
Most people
Yeah.
go in the other direction. So I think they should be given credit for choosing this option. Most people wouldn't do this.
And I appreciate, Paul, for sharing that, but I also appreciate that you didn't introduce your presentation by, we're looking to do this because we could do this. That's, I always feel like I'm having my arm twisted when that comes up.
Yeah.
But no, I believe the sincerity of the applicant, as you've presented it, that this is a desire to utilize these town's bylaws to create the least dense development of this parcel. As far as I know, it's the least dense allowable by our bylaws, other than,
Yeah.
you know, not dividing it and having 200-foot acre lots, but
So now you'll need to go to the planning board after us, assuming we approve this application?
Well, the planning board would have to sign the plan to create the lot lines. And the only reason for that is to have it recorded in the registry of deeds. And if we took the thresholds for the stormwater bylaw, that's in the general bylaw. If we took those
Right.
thresholds, then we file with the planning board as well, for stormwater, not conservation.
And the common driveway has to go before them?
Yes, the common
Yeah.
driveway would go, yes, I'm sorry, common driveway would go for those 2 lots on the left.
Right. Okay. Do you have anything else before audience?
See, Bob.
Bob, anything?
No, I'm in agreement with the board, meets all the requirements of 610-2B, has adequate frontage according to 720.1. I don't know what else you can ask of it.
Yeah. Anyone from the audience have any questions on this application?
I have just a quick question.
Sure, just your name and your address for the record, please.
You got Matt Kane, 12 Laurelwood Drive. I just want to validate if the road is private or public at this point. I'm not sure if it is or isn't.
It's a private road,
Private road at this point?
yes.
I think it's private in Situate, public in Norwell, right?
Yes.
I guess
It's a
that's
public
an
way.
important distinction, yeah.
So if you live in Norwell.
John Belson, 745 First Parish Road. So, most of my questions are drainage, and you guys don't want to hear them, I guess, right?
So I said not before us to decide on, that didn't mean we didn't want to hear them.
So my first question, why wouldn't they just put what was approved? Why they are asking for relief, in my opinion. I'm not at your level.
No, please, we want to hear you out.
The Kays are asking for relief, correct?
no, they're asking for a special permit.
They're asking for a special permit.
Okay. So can you explain, no, what are we reading? So there was no approval under the subdivision control law, not needed. Now, what does that actually mean? Can you just explain that a little bit?
A subdivision is when you have vacant land and you bring in a brand-new road with a fully, with a full cul-de-sac, and you're building all the utilities in the road and the drainage and everything. That's a subdivision. That has to be approved by the planning board with a public hearing. It has to be reviewed by the other agencies as well. If you have an existing roadway, such as Laurelwood Drive, that's been approved by the planning board, if you have frontage on that road, that's not a subdivision, that's called a division of land, and the planning board does not approve that as a subdivision, they approve it as approval not required under the subdivision control law.
I get it.
It's
So
frequently-
It cuts through a lot of red tape.
No, it's
basically.
frequently stated as an A and R, approval not required.
Okay.
It's simply a way to divide the land without, because it isn't a subdivision, it doesn't need to go through the board.
And to your question, it does cut through a lot of red tape by this being viewed as not a subdivision. But in order to avoid that red tape, you have additional requirements, which are the requirements of 610.2. Most notably, these lots are twice as large as is required in this district.
Okay, so
So you-
that's a funny, that's a strange reg, right?
Well-
You get a bigger lot, you get away with more? I mean, it's-
No,
Well, you-
no, no,
well, you
no, no,
don't-
no.
no, you actually get away with
You get away
less.
with less, that's the point. Understand, before you even think about this, there's 350 feet of frontage on the lot, on the way.
53 on the.
350 feet
Right
along the way, the whole distance from the existing dwelling all the way to the corner of the stone wall. With 350 feet, 100-foot frontage is needed. You could put 3 lots in here without coming before a board. They could basically just, they could A&R with no kind of relief. What they're looking for is not relief, but the application of a bylaw, which means that they have to double the lot size in order to get the reduced frontage. So basically, they're having the density. They're making the density half what it could be. They're not getting away with more. They're actually giving a lot back in order to avoid putting in a new road, which could sometime in the future become a public way, which sometime in the future could become a burden to the town. They're maintaining this all private and with half the density. So it's not getting away with anything, it's not taking advantage. It's
They
utilizing-
eliminate the possibility of there ever being another intersection there because they have the right under the code and other aspects of the code. They could put in a road and you could fit 10 house lots in there. And we're all familiar with some very nice neighborhoods throughout Situate that have taken that approach.
You could put a 40B in here.
And that's the other, yeah. So, but anyway,
I agree
please
with that,
continue.
but Thank you for explaining that. Back to the, it's an isolated wetland. Now, the commission came up and they ruled on that?
Yes, the commission had their own environmental scientists go out and review it at the owner's expense. He
Okay.
walked that whole site Monday, not just this area, but the entire property, and he reported back to them that was the only wetland on the site.
Okay. I didn't know that occurred. And, I mean, it's pretty obvious it's a stream right here. And if you would look at the topography, it's all rolling down here. 58, 60, you're gonna get absolutely hammered with all the water running that way. So that's my concern, like, who owns it? It's not, if it's not really going in front of the planning board or the Stormwater Act, you don't have to follow that because of what you've done.
Well, so when you say it's all going to run that way, it's, what about the application?
C and D soils, right, so they're full of clay, and, you clear all this land. I know you're not gonna take everything, we don't know what you're doing right now, we don't, but there's gonna be a massive amount of water. I mean, you don't have to be a civil engineer to understand that. And that's, I believe, I know of Paul, I know he does great work, and I know he
Sure.
can manage it, but I don't see how it's isolated wetlands, but, that's not me.
No, that's actually a bordered vegetated wetland.
Okay.
There's a small stream coming from here down
Yeah.
towards the bend in,
Goes over the,
down towards the lots in the bend in Vernon Road. The botanist would not go on the private property, but when he viewed this, we had some wet weather. That was first flagged back in August of last year when it was dry. And they, at the time, they felt it was isolated. But when they went out there this week, they could see there's a lot of water there. And in fact, the water comes up and it does push itself this way. So they call that a bordering vegetated wetland. But we pointed out to the commission that we don't need to do any work within 100 feet of the wetland, so we don't need to file with Conservation Commission. You know, assuming we didn't have to file under the stormwater bylaw, there's still laws and regulations on the books that say when we design these lots, we can't add more water to someone's property. That's why sometimes a small single-family lot, they have a small stormwater detention based on it to hold it back so you don't add any more water to put down.
so the
So you
Stormwater
go to
Act
property.
is coming into play, even though you're getting around the planning board.
It may,
May
depending
not.
on.
Yes,
I
so-
wanna know who's responsible.
So to answer your question, they are not looking to avoid any regulations on the book other than the 100 feet of frontage.
Okay.
That is the only relief we are giving them. Do you guys agree with that?
We're not giving them relief, we're
Well-
applying the bylaw.
That's true. The bylaw allows for a variation in the frontage requirement
Understood.
because they meet some other
In
criteria.
exchange for double the lot
Right.
size,
Okay, so that,
and never.
They are
further
still
subdivided.
subject to all of the stormwater regulations they would be if this was gonna be one house.
okay, that was maybe my
Sure.
concern, water. You know, you get it through, and a builder does it, he builds a McMansion
Right.
the best we can. We all know what's gonna happen, the trees come down. I am kinda at the hill, but it still pours through, like I said, that it does not drain, the soil isn't the best. It just stays, and my driveway keeps washing out. Not a big deal, I push it in, but if you go to First Parish right now, you know, between this whole parcel we're talking about, this road is frozen up, because you can see the groundwater coming out of the slope and getting on the hill. So that's just my concern. When it all goes through that, you know, who's responsible, that these things are really getting run. And I said, I'm in construction, I grew up in Situate, I've heard of Paul, I don't know him well, but I know he's very good at what he does, getting it through the town, not in a bad way, in a good way, and good with it. I just wanna know, like, is this gonna be covered? We can just, you know, is conservation, is planning board involved? It doesn't sound like it really is. It sounds like we got these, you
It
know,
may.
poles and going around stuff, which, you know, is probably over my head. Just wanted to, like,
No,
who's responsible?
So it's a very valid question. The stormwater regulations are not being amended or they're not being exempted from them in any way through this application.
As far as hurting in the neighborhoods, yeah, I don't see it really hurting the neighborhood unless water's coming through our slabs in our basements, right?
Well,
I mean, if the water table does change, you know, you guys are off the hook. It's someone else's fault after this, right? It's probably ours.
If a person builds a single-family house on a lot, they're required to build it in such a way that they're not discharging water, increasing water onto neighboring lots. They have to maintain the water on their own
I
lot.
know, I understand that.
If they subdivide it, if they divide it in this way, or if they divide it in a subdivision plan, same thing applies. All of that continues to apply. In fact, you may find, as you're describing currently, an unsatisfactory water situation coming off of this hill. Dividing, or creating the building lots and building the houses, and potentially retention, detention basins and others, swales, other type of water control that might take
Even
place.
just landscaping.
We
Right,
could,
so
just
Do we have the
landscaping.
right to ask for calculations? Peak runoff and volume and
Not
stuff
before
like
this
that?
board. That's not
We
what's-
have to wait
that's-
and hope that
That's
the-
not what's before
We
this
don't-
board.
That's
I'm
not
not,
your job. We have to-
neighbors can ask neighbors of anything. I'm not aware of something that gives you the right to those calculations.
But you can document
yeah.
existing conditions.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and then if those conditions seem to be exacerbated post-construction, then you can discuss it with the,
Post-construction, a lot easier to fix it, do it right the first time, that's all I ask.
I
And I believe this
agree
is the
with
man
you.
that can do it. I just thought that should be brought up, every, I know it's gonna affect all us. That's all, you know, so I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thank you, sir.
and understand that the code enforcement officer, when the building permits are issued, they look at what's proposed, and if there's a concern, they can address it. They can address whether or not there's going to be water, what are you doing to handle water here?
I think this dives more into a third-party peer review, though, wouldn't you say?
No.
No?
No.
It's
A
it's,
pretty technical, big job with a massive amount of water.
It's five house lots on 10 acres.
Yeah, it doesn't. That would be a.
If we were talking 10 houses,
If
That
yeah,
would-
if you're talking 10 houses, you'd
Yeah.
definitely be in subdivision control, you'd be doing in other things, but this is a limited development of 5 parcels in twice the lot area, half the density by right. It doesn't raise to that question.
I'm saying it's a huge scale. I guess maybe I'm over exaggerating. It's a massive amount of water if you take that much land down from where the water goes. I mean, I do think that it's a big undertaking for a civil engineer to, it's not the Toll Brothers down in Sand Hills. You can see the swales and the pumps and what they're doing down there. Then I'm sure it's not that scale, but it's a, you know, we live right at the swamp. It's an aquifer that's all coming down, heading to Heron River. It's a very intricate part of the whole system. So when I say, you know, big, I mean that it's pretty, it should be, you know, looked at, I guess, more than one eyes. I just thought that the town would want a third party peer review for something to this.
I don't believe the town has the right to require peer review for something like this. I mean,
Certainly this board doesn't.
recognize that while you're concerned what's happening to your property, this is someone's property too. And so there needs to be a balance of placing requirements on one versus the other. That's a complicated conversation, but,
Anthony?
yes, please.
Typically, what happens when we get a building permit application, it's accompanied with a site plan. The site plan has calculations of things like area of disturbance, area of impervious surface as opposed to pervious, which will allow the water to seep into the earth. The stormwater bylaws got very specific trigger points, and if any of those trigger points are met or exceeded, we are required and do submit that building permit application to the planning board for review. In the case of a review that does show the trigger points have been exceeded, the planning board does have the right to require third-party review, hire a town engineer, paid for by the proponent, by the applicant, to review all the calculations, to go over what the mitigation proposals are and whether or not they feel they're going to work. And they're very strict about that. So if, in fact, any of these single lots is proposed to be developed in a way that triggers any of those thresholds, that's what will happen.
Okay.
Sir, please.
Yeah, sorry, I was just following up that. Mike Considine, 60 Burnham Road, ground zero for that issue on the water.
Just your name and address one more time, please.
Oh, sorry, Mike Considine, 60 Burnham Road. When you were saying that, but I thought I heard you say if it's, would the two pieces, like if it's 100 feet away from the wetlands, like trigger?
Well, that wouldn't trigger Conservation Commission review and approval. That's a different board and a different set of things that they look at. So if you're not within 100 feet of what's been identified as a bordering vegetative wetland, then you don't need to go before the Conservation Commission. It doesn't have anything to do with stormwater.
Okay. But the stormwater trigger, that's the planning board gonna happen, or no? That's what I wasn't really clear of, and I know that's not you guys.
The regulations are in the general bylaws. It has to do, again, with how much of the area of the site is disturbed, how much is designed to be impervious area, as opposed to left alone, left in same forested state that it is now. And those trigger points, once they're exceeded, that becomes a matter for the planning board.
Ma'am?
Yeah, my name is Kirsty, it's on 77 Osborne Road. So we live in Mr. McKay's former property, well, wraps around.
The cutout there to the north.
Yes.
Yes.
And we just wanted to confirm that the entrance to these new properties was actually Laurelwood Drive, and that there were no demands or expectations on his previous property, which we now live in, for this development.
They
Oh,
won't
no.
They won't be using your driveway.
No, even if we wanted to give them rights in your property, we wouldn't be able to. Your property's yours, no one's allowed to touch it. Absolutely.
May I ask another question?
Of course.
Familiar with-
Just your name again, I assume you guys live together.
Where she's my other half.
Okay. How's that going?
He's still on trial.
All right.
First
Okay.
one. In the notice, it says it was 3 single-family lots, but we're talking about 5.
Two of them are already 100-foot frontage lots, so they don't need anything from us. They're looking to create 3 50-foot lots under the special permit. But those 100 feet, we don't have any say in because those are conforming lots.
So it's just because the other ones are narrower.
They're 50-foot frontage.
That's right. It is a little confusing. They're creating 5 lots. 2 of the lots, they are entirely allowed to create under the code. They don't need any form of review whatsoever in terms of the creation of the lots. Still subject to all the other bylaws we were talking about before. So 3 of the lots, they need to come before us so we can determine that they meet the criteria that we were just talking about, most notably being twice as large as is required in the zone.
And finally, can I just echo the concerns of my neighbours that have spoken up about where the water ends up?
Sure.
It is interesting to note also, though, the 2 100-foot frontage lots are being proposed as 3 1/4 and 2 acres, 2-acre lots, when you could have a 100-foot lot, half that size, so by right. It would be in backland, it would be isolated, there's no reason to do that. So the plan, although they are 100-foot frontage lots, they are huge 100-foot frontage lots, which would be difficult to further subdivide, although I guess they could be further subdivided.
What I can tell you, if I lived next to a vacant 11-acre parcel, and understanding what I understand about the code and knowing what I know about recent development in Situate, and I wanted my neighborhood to remain as peaceful and as quiet as it presently is, I wouldn't be able to wait until they did this, because this is the absolute best case. It'd be great if it stayed as woods, maybe, some of you folks think, but the only way to ensure that is to get together and buy the lot, right? This is the absolute best case scenario. This is the least dense and forever least dense, which is an important thing. Once they do this, this land is now restricted and cannot be further subdivided.
Lot 4 and 3.
The 3 lots that they're doing here, the other 2 lots could be. But they're making it more difficult to subdivide those 2 lots because the 3 lots on the outside cannot be further subdivided. We're removing the potential for greater density.
And that's a done deal, like they can't change that along the process?
If they go forward with developing this plan, they could file this plan and then later choose not to develop it and abandon it. You can abandon an A&R.
Yeah. Once they start building, it's over.
Well, I'm just asking, like,
Yep.
look, it
It-
sounds
it-
great, double lots.
it's in
that's
perpetuity.
down, But if they, from what I hear, if they file a plan and a year later, hey, I'm gonna be greedy and get for exactly what I want, this, we have to re-engage again.
They would have to re-engage again. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
not
they can't just
approving
come in,
anything
yeah.
else now.
No.
That's all I'm asking.
No,
Right.
sometime
You
in
get
the
a new
future, they would
notice.
have to come in and say, this is what exists on the ground today, this is what exists in the plan on paper, and this is what we would like to do.
But that becomes a much more of a nullity once they start developing the lots and sell off the first one. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
John Kimball, 769 First Parish. You mentioned that there's frontage along Laurelwood and there's also frontage on First Parish?
Not any longer. At the time that the McKay property that these folks now are in, had frontage on First Parish, I think still does. Prior to the existence of Laurelwood, that parcel would have fronted only on First Parish. What I was getting at in my inquiry was this parcel B that was created, that is part of this application, benefited with the construction of Laurelwood because it acquired frontage on a way that didn't exist prior to Laurelwood's development. But it has no frontage on First Parish. Parcel A, the parcel that the existing house was on, continued to have that frontage on First Parish.
And the frontage on Laurelwood is enough for the 5?
It's 350 feet, so they're taking 200 feet of that and creating two 100-foot frontage lots, and then taking the remaining 150 feet and creating three 50-foot frontage lots.
Okay.
In round numbers, I think it might be a few
Which
feet
is
more.
enough under the code because the three 50-foot frontage lots that they are creating are twice the required minimum size for the lot.
Okay, and so what this will likely look like, you said there's not gonna be a cul-de-sac. This will likely be a private road that will go in and.
It's gonna be Laurelwood.
No.
It is an existing road.
Laurelwood will be their road.
They'll have driveways
They will
coming
have
out to it.
driveways off Laurelwood.
The 5 driveways will all come off of.
It could be 5 driveways, or they could have common driveways if they chose. We have allowed three units, three houses on a common drive.
They're not proposing any new street. They just
Okay.
they're proposing these 5 lots, and then at some point, it sounds like they're gonna propose driveways to those. But as,
Well, if you have
Mr.
two abutting
Tibbetts.
50-foot lots, you
They
need-
have to have a
you
common
have to
drive.
have a common driveway.
1 and 2 has
for
to
that
have
lot.
Right.
have a common
1 and 2, the ones on the top,
Right, yeah.
these two. Because,
or the adjoining ones.
Right.
again, one of the restrictions of the 50-foot frontage is that they don't want a lot of curb cuts, 50-foot frontage curb cuts. So if you have two 50-foot frontage lots adjoining, they have to have a common drive. They could have, I suppose, one common drive for 1, 2, and 3. If that was desirable in the overall scheme of things.
Probably doesn't make the most sense.
Unlikely.
That's what I'm part of, a common drive with 2 off of it, so.
Sure.
And that works fine. Okay. What about setback? And with a situation like this, if these folks wanted to go in and literally clear to our lot line, that's up to them?
So the zoning bylaw doesn't prevent folks from cutting down trees. To a certain extent, certain amounts of clearing could trigger the stormwater bylaw,
Correct.
which would then make sure that the clearing didn't exceed the threshold where it would get into some of the issues this gentleman was talking about. There is no requirement in this type of development for shading or the maintenance of any trees or buffers or things.
Screening or any,
No.
isn't that more commercial?
Yes, and some other things, but on a residential lot like this, especially where they're making a lot this large, there are no screening requirements on the books.
And that's where you were suggesting that they were looking for relief or looking for, that's the kind of relief that we can grant in situations where someone's looking for relief from zoning. We can require screening, excessive setbacks.
If someone wanted to build closer to the lot line than the code allows, and if we were willing to give them that ability, we could then place those requirements on them.
Let's say a lot had a large portion of ledge in the lot, and they just can't build over there, so they want to be able to pull it over here. That's a legitimate request. But we might say, well, but you're going to be close to this other property. You can't clear any land within 10 feet of that, or,
Put up some arborvitae's.
put up our arborvitae's, whatever. We're looking for relief on one side, we can grant it the other. They're not looking for any relief here, so we can't impose anything upon them or seek their, I mean, neighbors can seek it of neighbors, that's always true. But we don't even know exactly where they might place a house here.
Yeah, and at any point, do we have the right as a butters to ask where the houses are going and where the retention ponds go? It's basically wait until it's drawn and.
You have the right to ask whatever you want to ask. I'm not aware of any requirement that anyone else tell you what they plan to do with their property, as long as they're doing it within the law and the code.
Well, once an application's filed with us, it's public
Absolutely.
information.
Including
So
building
all
permits, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all the house plans, all of the site plans, all aspects of the development become public information.
But as a butter, you don't know when that happens, or you just?
Well, no, it has to come to my office. Yes, that's right. We don't inform abutters of that.
Okay,
You would need to, query us periodically.
come visit you a lot.
Yeah, or email.
If they were seeking, but to be honest, folks,
And that happens. I mean, it does.
it would be rather rare if you asked a neighbor who was developing their property to see the plans that they filed with the building department, that they would say, no, you have to go to the building department, and we're not going to tell you when we're going to file them. I'd be surprised if that was the case here. Yeah.
If a parcel transfers, that's public knowledge, it's posted in newspapers, you can find out someone bought the lot transferred to someone. The new owner is likely to want to do something with it. You introduce yourself to your new neighbor and say, so what are your plans? And, it would be fine if the board sent out notice that we want to let everyone know that so-and-so just bought this property and they plan to develop it within the next 2 years. But we don't have any regulations to burden them with either that notice or telling us or anyone else. I mean, they can do with it as long as they do it within rights and do it just like you'd want to be able to do with your house, with your lot.
No, I get that, I'm just more like, I'm more talking like his point, like when it shows up in the planning board. Like
You'll get a notice then.
You'll get a notice.
Public hearings, you'll get
That's
notice.
more what I was asking.
Stormwater conservation planning, you'll get notice. The public
But if
hearings.
they just file a building permit, you won't get any notice. But like Bob said, you can just do periodic,
So there'll be a notice for the,
put periodic emails.
what we know about at this point is there will be an eventual notice for the shared driveway, even though there won't be much more information than you see in this application other than the shared driveway.
Planning board has to grant that.
And then if their plans don't trigger the stormwater bylaw, there may not be much more notice. To the extent they need relief from any other things, they have to appear before one of the boards, and you would receive notice.
Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else? All right. With that,
Yes,
You good?
I'm good.
do we have a motion?
On the application of Mary E. McKay and Patrick H. O'Brien, trustees of 35 Doctors Hill Drive, Situate, Mass., on their request for a special permit pursuant to section 610.2B of the Situate zoning bylaw for the creation of 3 single-family 50-foot frontage lots located on Laurelwood Drive, as shown on the plan prepared by Ross Engineering, Paul Marabito, dated November 18th, 2019. I move that the board grant the special permit with the condition that for the 3 lots, those being lots 1, 2, and 5, with the conditions that there be a deed restriction and it be noted on the plan that those 3 lots shall not be further subdivided.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Who's up? I can do that one. You can put me on the reminder list for that one. I'll see you in about 11 days. And then you remind me.
Appreciate it, fellas. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course, they were good, they're good questions.
That's what we do. Merry Christmas.
Yes. They'd like to have Jeff write it. That, no, that sounds great.
You can
I think
prepare a
Jeff should write it, yeah. Well, we're happy to review Jeff's draft.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to Situate. Yeah, I didn't know that, but I figured it was somebody in close relation.
Somebody's a barkeep? Where?
Barker.
All right. All right, Jeff's gonna write that one. Beth, did you get that?
Jeff's gonna prepare a draft.
Jeff's gonna write that one. Jeff DeLisi.
This one?
Yeah,
He's not even here.
I know. But I don't got a problem with somebody else doing my work. Especially when I know they're pretty good at it.
Does he know he's doing it?
I don't know, we'll probably ask him. I can send him an email. If he doesn't want to do it, I'll do it.
Paul just represented that that his client had requested that, his client will
Is the,
request Jeff do that, so. It's
Right.
not on us. He will prepare a draft for our
Where'd that go?
consideration.
What's that?
yeah? Somebody here?
Our second application is an application of SLV WW Situate LLC of 257 Hillside Avenue in Needham, requesting a special permit pursuant to section 710.2 of the Situate zoning bylaw to allow the installation of signage at 126 through 132 Chief Justice Cushing Highway for the project known as Herringbrook Meadow. Hi there.
Hey, how are you? Andrew Tibman representing SLV WW Situate.
Hello.
Oh,
Just your name.
Tibma.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, how are you?
Not bad. Why don't you tell us what we're doing?
Yeah, so we're requesting a special permit for a sign that's going to be temporary out front of the property where we're going to, essentially where the construction vehicles are entering the property currently. And we're hoping that we could have the temporary sign out there potentially until maybe April of 2021, and it's going to contain basic contact information for the property.
Okay. And so I guess my main question is, we don't have a plan, and I'm not sure that's a problem, but where the construction vehicles are currently entering,
Yep.
where's it going to be with respect to that current entrance of construction vehicles?
It's going to be just probably 10 or 15 feet to one of the sides of the property where it's, easiest to put the sign.
Okay,
So to the left or to the right, I'm not totally sure.
so it'll be within 10 yards on one side, not both sides of the construction entrance.
Yep, that's correct.
Is the proposal that's before us.
And it will run essentially parallel to the street,
Yes.
not perpendicular,
3A.
parallel to 3A.
Um,
So as you drive by, it'll be on the side. It won't be
I
a
would
two-sided
say-
sign with,
whether or not it's going to be slightly angled so folks can read it, I do not totally understand, but you'd imagine that it's going to be potentially parallel.
you wouldn't want to prejudice your case for the people going north or south. You want to make
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
It's probably either gonna be
Everyone
90 or
a
parallel.
little bit of both. Yeah, both people would.
More or less parallel as opposed to,
And at 12
Perpendicular.
feet
Perpendicular.
wide, it's probably gonna
intended to be
be
perpendicular.
parallel.
Yeah.
it's 12 feet wide. It's got, we're showing it as a single-phase sign, not a two-phase sign.
Yep, single face side.
4 feet, 9 feet high.
It's going to have a pretty picture like that?
I actually haven't seen the exhibit that was submitted. Yeah, I could imagine it looks something like that.
Place along travelways.
So they can do amazing things with computer-generated graphics.
Well, they can stick that on the side of your car. They could drive up and down the street. You know,
Put it on a bus.
there you go.
The application's for 710.2, right?
Right.
I'm not sure this is a 710.2 sign.
This is 12. It's 12 by 5. Big.
Well, 710.2 is for property protection, for sale or for rent signs. Business and commercial signs may be placed along travelways for the purposes of indicating direction to their facility. That's not what this is.
No.
This is an advert. Should be granted only after a finding that. There. No sign, no sandwich boards. I would not necessarily saying there's any problem with your sign. I just want to be clear as to what relief we're granting you. And it's a unique situation as far as I can tell, because the code, understandably so, says these are the signs you're allowed to put up or not put up on house lots, and these are the signs you're allowed to put up or not put up in business districts. Now, this isn't a house lot anymore, understandably, even though it's not in a residential. Is it in a business district?
No, it's residential.
It is a residential district. Thank you, ma'am. So the code, what we're going to get into with the audience for a minute is, just because the code doesn't say the regulations, that doesn't necessarily mean the sign's not allowed. There's actually a strong argument that says that the sign is allowed. But we'll get into that. So I think we need to this is where, this is where they make individuals interpret the code, because the code understandably doesn't apply to every eventuality.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
I think 710.2C is for something like the cock and kettle sign, or the
Hornstra.
Hornstra sign, or the
Yeah.
the river
Next left.
Riverwalk sign, those, or the welcome to North Situate.
Right, which
Situate
might
commercial
go up in a
district.
residential district, because they come to me and say, we want to put a sign on your lot, we're going to give you $100, and we want to tell people to make the next left.
And those are signs up to 120 square feet. I mean, this one we're looking at is half that. It's 120 by 5. 12 by 5, so, no, it'd still be, yes.
It's 3 times,
Sorry, what?
60 feet.
60,
Yes.
60 square feet.
3 feet.
60 square feet, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
So but the allowed one of those directional signs was 120 square feet, I think.
And in a
believe it's
business
100.
district, where, to be honest, this is,
Such signs may need directional purposes and must not exceed 100 square feet, so.
it's, I think we need to apply the business district, at least some of the business district regulations here. Should we just hear from the audience first, maybe? Because,
Yeah.
I imagine some of them are going to make a different argument. I think we should hear it. Would you like to go?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you go?
AILD,
Very
you have
amusing, don't you?
125 Chief Justice
It's not
Cushing.
funny to us. I'm
My-
sorry.
My reading of the residential district special permit, it had to be reasonable in size, economically necessary, and max 20 square feet. That's straight from the bylaw. It's a residential district, no question about that.
Yeah.
I think temporary, you have to define what that means. Does that mean 6 months, 12 months, 5 years? What does it mean? Seeing as we have to live with it for whatever temporary is. Is it gonna be lighted? Don't know.
We'll know, we'll know
Yeah,
that.
that would need to be part of the application, which, as far as I can tell, it is not. But your comments as to the size and this being a residential district are well taken.
I'd like to hear from the applicant or yourselves how it will promote and protect the aesthetic value of the town.
It doesn't need to.
Yeah, I think,
It's a general statement at the beginning of zoning bylaws.
The zoning bylaw that's in question before us is specifically stipulates that in residential districts, you're allowed to have signs for specific purposes. Clearly, for sale signs, for rent signs, room let signs, etc. It would seem to me that this is more that than it is a business commercial sign to provide directions to a facility. The facility is directly behind it.
No one's gonna miss the facility.
I understand that. So I don't know that 710.2C applies here. I think it is 710.2B.
yes,
And in that case, it is limited to 20 square feet.
I think his comments as to size
So
are
they
very valid.
So they are three times the size. However, what it doesn't say in 710.2C, 2B, or 710.2 is that there can only be one sign. We could end up having a number of 20-foot signs showing for sale. So we need to consider the aesthetic value for the town.
That's in
Is-
your control, not mine.
But you raised the question, and I'm answering it. If we've got, 60 units for sale, could we have 60 for sale signs, one for each unit? Littering the side,
It's advertising in a residential district.
littering the side of the road. It's a for sale sign for an individual property
Right.
that's allowed by special permits, so they'd have to come to us and ask for it, but they could conceivably ask for that. I don't think I'd be willing to, consider that sort of thing, but that does raise the question of, is a larger sign acceptable?
The last question I have is, if assuming you do provide a special permit, who is in charge of monitoring and enforcing the regulation as it's stated by you?
The building commissioner.
The code enforcement officer.
Bob Vogel, I'm the
Code
building
enforcement
commissioner.
person.
Code enforcement officer is
They go
Bob
down
Vogel.
and they'll actually measure it, make sure it's fitting.
Right.
Yep,
The-
we were there today.
The other thing I think we need to consider here is that the applicant has the ability to modify their permit for the 40B to include this sign.
Absolutely.
And then a lot of our ability to say yes or no goes away, because if the applicant argued that this was necessary to the financial viability of the project, that it was necessary in any way to advertise that the project would include affordable units, they would be given that right
Put up a
in,
neon sign with
into,
verbiage.
sir, you gotta let us finish. Please. I can do it, ma'am, at the portion where we hadn't yet opened it up to the public, which is what I thought was funny, because we've had those conversations before. We will give you folks a period to speak for as long as you would like. We have shown that, and we'll stay here for hours if you have more to say. But we certainly get our turn. That is our other consideration here, that this is a 40B. The handcuffs, for lack of a better word, or the additional scrutiny that is placed on our ability to regulate this property is real, and it is something that I'm not sure any of us are big fans of. on either side of this table, but it is a reality nonetheless. Your point regarding the size of the sign is well taken, and I agree with you that it applies here. I'm of the opinion that if we strictly enforce that, our right to enforce that would be taken away from us under 40B. Now, does that mean we have to let them build a 60-square-foot sign? I'm not sure it does. Did you have anything else to add regarding the sign?
Nothing.
Did you have something?
No, I just think, like you said, detail about lighting. It's gonna be uplit, downlit.
No lighting.
Yeah.
It's not,
If you hadn't, just to clarify, if you hadn't brought up lighting and we received this application and they lit the sign, I would be of the opinion that wasn't part of the application we approved. So I guess now is a good time to say that if you plan for the sign to be lit, we need a better understanding of that, because if they had said, great, this is a great sign, and we had approved it, I wouldn't be of the opinion that we approved a lit sign.
Yeah,
So
as of
we'll-
yet, we have no intentions of lighting the sign.
Great. And to answer your question, this application, if we approved it, and we certainly have not, and they put up a light, that would be beyond what we had approved.
the Toll Brothers project has a sign in front of in front of the trailer.
Yep. The new ones that just went up?
Yeah. Isn't there a sign in front of Toll Brothers now? Not there,
Not.
the
yeah,
for
not-
sale sign that's in front of the trailer on the east side of the road?
Yeah, I'm trying to visualize it, and I was just there. I believe yes, and I think there's another one on the corner of Tilden and Turner.
Well, that one I can, yes. And
I don't think they're terribly large.
that's what I'm thinking. I wonder if we could model it dimensionally to that. But
I would say that those are probably the 20 square foot that's spoken about in under B.
yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Sarah Lannon. I live at 133 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, so I'm directly across the street. I may be one of the closest houses to this project because I have an old farmhouse and I'm right up to the road. So where the construction vehicles are going in and out is directly in front of my house. And I know we were told that the construction vehicles would not be coming to make deliveries before 7 a.m. And we have it on our cameras, 6:27 a.m. They're coming in, they're unloading those big trucks, bang, bang. 6:44 a.m., we had a tractor trailer pull up our driveway so it could back straight across it one morning. Couldn't believe it, in our driveway. I go back to the first Irish family that settled Situate, so I just want to at least say, not only have I grown up here, and my mother grew up here, and her mother, my dad did 50 years on the Situate Police Department, so I'd like to just kind of throw that out a little bit. But our house shakes. When that steamroller is going, our chandeliers, our stove, our bathroom, our glass, I have a cup of water, the water is shaking. I put my hand on the wall of my house, it's vibrating, it's shaking. The noise, my house is 1871, I do understand that, but it has never made the noises that it has made before. I just want to put on record, our peace has been completely, my husband's a nurse at Cardigan Nursing Home. He works nights, he gets home at 1 in the morning, and when it's 6:27, those tractor trailer trucks are pulling in, I've made, a couple of phone calls, and then it corrected. When I had a
I'm
nice
glad to hear that,
conversation.
because I had
It
a
corrected for a short time,
heart-to-heart
and then
conversation.
it came back again, and, deliveries where the trucks are leaving before 7. They've made the deliveries, they've left. There were the row of trees right along the road that they said would not be cut down so that we wouldn't have the visual. They cut every single one of those trees down, all the trees down. They promised a large, I think it was a beechwood tree, I forget it was a large tree in the center where when we were here before and they showed us the blueprint or the plans, That tree was where everyone was supposed to be driving around. They were going to keep that tree. They cut that tree down. Okay, that tree was gone. I just feel like when we're told things, okay, now we're talking about a sign, is it really going to stay what they're saying? I mean, we're told that the line of trees would be there, they're gone. We're told not before 7 in the morning. So many times that we're not just like we're woken up, but it's like bang, and like we're awake, and it's not happy mornings, trust me. Like, I just feel that, our peace has just been so disrupted. And I mean, I really don't know what else to say other than if it's not supposed to be before 7, they shouldn't be there at 6:27, 6:44, 6:55. I mean, I'm just throwing things out there. That tractor trailer truck never should have pulled up our driveway so it could back in across the street. My son's school bus picks him up right out front, and I think it was Monday, tractor trailer was pulling out. It was inches from that school bus. When the school bus was stopped, picking him up, tractor trailer's pulling out right behind. I'm thinking, what happens to 100 feet from behind the school bus? My heart, it's a 50-mile-an-hour zone. He's out there waiting for that bus. And it's just, even in the beginning when they started, the tractor trailers were parked on the side of 3A in the dark, cars leaning on the horns back and forth. There were no police details. I feel like there's a big safety thing here. I know I could go on and on. I really don't want to because of, I'm just saying, but if this is what the sign is, I think, they've just broken promises. And I know I spoke to you, and I know you had said, well, they realized the tree wasn't going to live. Well, yeah, because the bulldozer, they bulldozed up the roots. Like, we watched it. Even my husband used to do tree work, was like, that tree's not going to live. They're killing it. And then sure enough, a week later, they just cut the whole thing down. It's sad. I mean, again, I'm a lifelong resident. My ancestors, I go back to Daniel Ward, first Irish family that settled here. And I just feel, what is happening? I'm looking at the big pond that's across the street, the water that's been there. We see it, they're pumping out into the marsh. It's crazy. I mean, we won't get into all this like the wetlands or whatever, the marsh grass that was over there, but it's just sad. And I just wish that the rules would be followed. I really do. Like I said, my dad was 50 years on the police department in this town, and I just feel that when I went to the police station and spoke about this problem, I couldn't help but thinking, wow, if this was my dad working, I feel like maybe something would have been done instead of like, what can we do? You know what I mean? It's just like, we live here. This is my house. My house is right there. And the noise is nonstop. I mean, it's, even 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning when the regular pickup truck workers, some of them come early, they just shine their headlights right into our house. It's like, it's ridiculous. You can just turn the truck the other way. And there are 2 entrances, not just 1 entrance, so there are 2 entrances. I mean, the trucks are just coming and going. It's hard. I mean, I know I can't stop it. I know it's going to happen. It's going to be built, but I don't know. And then they'll just be there on Sundays, I believe. And they come on Sundays. Not to. I mean, they do unlock the gates. They come in. I don't know. And then I thought they were supposed to be done at 6 at night. We have 6:27. The excavator going. I mean, sitting down for dinner, and it's like, oh my gosh, here we go again. It's still not over. So I don't know. But that's. I just want to hope they keep to what they say they're doing. I just feel like they get permission and then do whatever they want to do. I don't know. And then the water is concerning. I mean, like, people are joking about, oh, we could put skates on, go and skate over there, but I don't know. Anyways, but that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. To your point about the deliveries, which I know was an issue, and I was party to some of the correspondence that I was under the impression had stopped them. How recently have you noticed the deliveries there before 7 a.m.?
Do you know when the last time it happened? Probably not. It's probably been the best right now.
Okay.
But I mean,
They haven't worked this week. They haven't been.
They haven't. Yeah, that's true. They haven't really since Thanksgiving. It seems like they haven't worked that
Well,
much.
right around Thanksgiving, I think, was the last conversation that you had with them.
Yeah, I mean, I made it as clear as I possibly could that this had to stop, and I got agreement that they would, you know, the general contractor running the project has subcontracted hauling of the fill.
Right.
And they were going to speak to the subcontractors. If it hasn't stopped, then please get in touch with the office.
And then, there's that green tarp tied around the fence. You know, like tells the fence is that green tarp. That got loose, and that blew across 3A, and that was pretty serious. And I don't know who called the police, it wasn't us, we actually weren't, I was not home at the time, but the police came, and, I mean, that was kind of a, you know, and I think the police officer tied it back, or someone else put it over and tied it back.
That was November 16th, that was a civilian who tied it down. It was multiple days afterwards before it was properly replaced onto the fence. So one of the things about like a temporary sign, I'd be wondering if it's like a tarp, or if it's like an actual sign, because if it's like a tarp, there's been a lot of high winds gushing right through there, could easily blow into the road. I mean, this tarp was blowing almost to the yellow line that day. A civilian pulled over, tied it down around the telephone pole, it was up like that for a couple days, police were there. I don't think that like safety is like one of the top priorities here. I mean, it's a 50-mile-an-hour zone. I've seen, one of the fastest cars I saw, it was a police car go by, but people go a bunch more than 50. It's a passing zone, it's a blind corner. We don't need more distractions, like a 60-foot sign there. There's plenty of distractions as it is. There was one morning I was there before 7 o'clock filming them. Someone passed the wrong way. Well, cars were coming, like past where it wasn't a passing zone, heading southbound. Trucks have been parked, not so much since they have made the fill inside, but once when the trees were still there, trucks were parked in the road before 7, in dark mist before, and cars were honking their horns. That woke me up. I just think that something should be done about the safety, especially how this could be a distraction, because someone could die out there, because it's kind of a dangerous spot.
I think the gentleman raises a good question. Can you tell us a little bit about the proposed material of the sign?
I believe that the sign will be made out of wood, but I'm not 100% sure. It's not going to be made out of tarp, that's for sure.
Okay, it's good to know. Not to dismiss your questions about the safety. I think they're good questions. I think we all think they're good questions. That question was answered in prior applications, and we don't have the ability to say that this project is unsafe and stop it. They're valid questions. It's a busy street. They're valid questions. We don't have the ability to regulate that portion of it. To what you were saying, we will get to you in just one moment. If the deliveries continue before 7 a.m., please do notify us. I was part of the conversations. There were consequences, the consequences aren't, hey, now you can't build your project, fortunately or unfortunately, but there will be consequences if that continues.
Because I know after I first spoke to you, Mr. Bulger, then what was happening was, instead of pulling into the property, they were just pulling alongside 3A and then waiting till 7 o'clock, then pulling in.
Yeah,
gosh, like,
that's a delivery, right.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
That's a delivery.
You're not supposed
Yeah.
to be idling.
Yeah, they were idling out there,
No.
and it was like, and then at 7, then they'd pull in, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's 3A, it's, you know, like cars, they can't go by two directions.
Probably the worst place to sit with a semi.
Now, different from that is anyone arriving at the property at all before 7 a.m., it's somebody's property, right? They're allowed to go there. Work and deliveries regulated under the permit, different. Same as on Sundays. Work on Sundays, I think, is prohibited under the permit.
Yep.
Anyone being present there on Sundays, not so much prohibited under the permit. So I want to make sure that the complaints that you lodge, or I guess I should say I would request that the complaints that you lodge are the ones that are 100% valid, and there are some and there have been some. But I think that's important, and the deliveries, is something we do have control on, so I want to make sure that we take care of that.
That's right, it's not just like they just pull in and they drop something off. I mean, it's a big tractor load.
And that's why we were able to place those restrictions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just Phil, it was also an excavator and a dumpster when they were tearing down the house.
Yep.
Yeah, the
And the-
dumpster, yeah.
In the permit, it says no activities should be made on Sundays. Well, on the other days of the week, it says like no construction or deliveries.
Right.
It does say no activities.
Sure.
But you can't reasonably prohibit someone from being on their property
Right.
on a
Right.
Sunday. That's,
We're saying if
We're-
somebody's there walking around, taking some pictures, measuring something on Sunday, we're not going to have any luck prohibiting them from doing that. If the excavator's running on Sunday, different story.
Thank you.
Of course. Ma'am?
Osha Klein, 146, I'm one of the abutters to the property. I know what I say will have very little effect on what happens, but I must tell you, I'm very saddened by what I see going on. I've lived in Citrus, this will be my 40th year. I know it is a 40B. It seems to me you take more care and consideration with them than you do with the direct abutters. As with my neighbor across the street, my house has been vibrating. I'm a potter, my pots vibrate on the shelf. I've asked you what to do. I know that what I say will have little effect on what happens, but I wish you would take consideration the views of the abutters. They have promised us things, they've told us that things would not be, landscape would be left, trees would be left, and I can't take these people at their word. It seems to me they're going to build way high, they're low, as Bob has told me, the landfill is going to go directly to the street, which will make my house below, my property below. They're basically destroying any of the houses that are in the environment. I don't know how to, there's nothing that I really can do except to express my displeasure, not my displeasure, my unhappiness and disappointment of what's going on. I don't know what to say. Nothing, whatever I say, it's like beating my head against the wall. I just feel very saddened by the whole thing.
Sure.
I know that I might say I'd like the sign to be the town limit, but if you do that, they'll go to the state and the sign will be bigger. It's destroyed basically any trees that I had as a protection. I see the lights coming into my house and the trucks are there before 7 o'clock. I hear them idling because I get up early to go to work. I don't know what to say. And the water in the back is because they took out all the protection in the environment. That's all, and you know that. And what's going to happen? It's never going to go away, and they're continually going to pump that water into the marsh, which is detrimental to the environment. I don't know what else to say, but say that I'm just saddened by the whole situation. Thank you.
Understandable. Bob?
I can speak at least to the pond, so to speak, that's existing there now. One of the conditions, Marcia and everyone, was that they go and excavate that area to get rid of the Phragmites.
And the Phragmite is protected against the water.
Well, that may be so, but again, this was a Conservation Commission and a State Department of Environmental Protection requirement that the Phragmites be eradicated. To do that, they had to scoop out about 3 feet of soil. I was amazed. I'd never seen the root structure of a Phragmites stand, of that extent before, but it's kind of terrifying, if I can use that word. At any rate, that's gone. The intent is to refill that area with non-contaminated soil as soon as the weather allows, which will probably be the spring as we're looking at it right now. So you need to pump it at some point to get whatever residual water is there gone, and then it'll be replanted with benign species as opposed to invasive species. That was part of the requirement from the State Department of Environmental Protection. So that's what you're seeing. It's admittedly at a very awkward stage. We were there today looking at the silt fences, looking at the outlet to the marsh and trying to figure out how to prevent any kind of silt buildup or silt in the water getting out into the marsh.
bloody cone, I might add, but it was a good visit. And we had, again, a representative from the state DEP with us. Our conservation agent was there, I was there, the contractor's representative. So that problem at least has an end to it in sight. There won't be a pond back there when the project is finished.
The things that does distress me is that he said that he would leave trees there, and he's basically gone back on his word. And I just, that upsets me.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot to be upset about. I don't question that for a moment.
And it's our house.
I'm curious too, because I did ask and was assured that those vibrating rollers they use are part of what they need to do to get the subbase compacted sufficiently so they can build a building on it. It's just an engineering methodology that there's really no other way to do what they need to do. But they did tell me that the rollers themselves or the vibrating component can be dialed down, and I was hoping that had happened. If it
My house
hasn't,
was vibrating last week,
So
and
it-
when I was working in the studio this week. And as I told you when we spoke on the phone, I had a photographer there who lived in San Francisco, and she said it was as rattling as any earthquake.
Oh, I know, I've been on site when that's going on, so I absolutely know what you're talking about.
But
I
I
had
have,
hoped they had been able to modify it, and it was better. It won't go away, but it should be able to be dialed down a little bit.
yeah, no, I have honestly, like, I'm a pretty strong person too, but I have left my house just because I have been unable to stay in while it has been shaking, the way it was shaking, just to go down the harbor to go for a walk. Because
Well-
I've actually been because it's just constant. It's just like, it doesn't matter what
again, I
room I
know.
go in the house. It's not like I can go into the back of the house.
Yeah.
It's like any room, and it is rattling and
Yeah.
shaking, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, and I'm just like, I say to my husband, I have to leave. I have to go down the harbor and go for a walk. I said, this is just not peace. Like, my
Well,
peace is,
As I say, I hope
Yeah.
that we can do something to make it less. I hoped I had done something. I will have that conversation again in the strongest possible terms, I assure you. But the process is the one that's required to achieve the engineering result that they require of the site. There's no other way to do what they're doing except how they're doing it.
Once they start building, how do we know that our houses will not continue to shake with all that input that comes in?
Well, no more than they would shake, I would think, if large trucks are going by on 3A, which I'm sure is, that does happen as well.
no, this isn't.
No, I understand,
Yeah,
but this
He-
isn't happening, this
Yeah.
happens until the platform for the building is constructed, which will probably be sometime, depending on the weather, in the next 2 or 3 months, and then it doesn't happen anymore. They've done what they need to do at that point.
One last note on that, I have a window upstairs, and it's unlike most windows that open up, it actually opens down. And there has been I've had to do it multiple times, I've had to push it back up, which has been extremely annoying to me because the cold draft comes in. I look and there's this much space between where it should be. I just keep pushing it back up every day, just keep falling down. I've never had that problem before.
Well, I understand.
We'll go to him, we'll come back to you.
I have a few questions.
Sir, I'm sorry, just your name. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Warren Borough, 15 Marble Lane. Just what the building inspector said, this is what they needed to do to get this thing. They can engineer it, it might cost more, but do it at a slower pace or whatever. So there's different ways around everything. That's most likely they're doing the most economical way to do this. That works, I guess, but there's other ways that work. It just might take a little longer, everything else. Touch up on a few other things. I wish this gentleman was a little more prepared. He didn't even know which side the sign was going on, what type of material was going to be made out of, if it's lighted or anything. It just seems like there's no one there at this construction site. you go by that green screening fence that we've all driven by, it's been hanging there for over a month. I mean, I don't know why they don't put it up. There's trash blowing against 5 Martha's Lane fence, you can see it. That's been there for at least a month and a half as well. I mean, and it's just like they show no respect to the neighbors. The noise is just unbelievable. I was sitting in my room on a Saturday when they were digging up Vinnie Kalish's foundation with an excavator. It was so loud and annoying, I left my house because I couldn't take it anymore. Okay, this is on a Saturday. Why isn't that work being done during the week when the people that are working Monday through Friday have the weekends off? There's just no courtesy to the neighbors. They don't follow up on anything they said they would do. And I don't even know, is this project supposed to be all fenced in by law too, not just the front? I have a daughter I tell her continuously to stay off the property. I'm scared to death she's gonna go out there and get crushed. And I know the people behind us have grandchildren as well. With all this machinery moving around, I thought that most construction sites get completely fenced, even for insurance reasons. Never mind falling and drowning in that pond back there.
I don't know the answer to that question. Bob, is there any requirement for fencing that you're aware of that's not being complied with?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll take a look at it in the morning.
Thank you.
I mean, most construction sites you see, they fence it all the way around.
Yeah, I think that may be more of a, I know that fencing is done for security concerns.
Like a pool, when you don't want people to get hurt.
Yeah, I know fencing is done for security concerns. I also am not aware of a requirement for fencing around a construction site. If they were digging, I believe there would be a requirement. So I am not sure that there is a fencing requirement.
For how long, you know?
Yeah, if there, for instance, a foundation, if there was a drop,
Been digging there too.
it's something.
I think their insurance company would probably be the one that would be the most likely to enforce that sort of a restriction, and I would expect they would be.
We're counting on you guys and the enforcement agent to really help us here.
No, I understand.
The ins and outs and what should be done and whatnot, we don't know the laws.
I'm trying to suggest that oftentimes it isn't a law that says a site has to be restricted, it has to be fenced. It's done for insurance purposes to minimize costs of insurance. Construction is a miserable thing. If you recall, during our discussions on this project and on others, where I raised the question of how many truckloads of fill were going to have to be brought in. I mean, I recognize the issues. It's unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the fact that construction is a disruptive time. It's miserable. The good news is this type of a project tends to happen pretty quickly. I mean, they're talking about, according to the sign here, it's going to be ready for occupancy in spring of 2021. So there is an end in sight. The heavy equipment part, the site development, is probably, we're looking at, I would guess probably by June we should be really finished with the lion's share of that. Then we're talking about building the buildings, which is annoying, but it's the kind of annoyance that we're much more familiar with. Small trucks coming, delivering workers, material, but not the kind of soil compaction and stuff that's been going on. I recognize the excavation for the Phragmites was extraordinary. I mean, I looked at it when it was happening and thinking that's how amazing, but necessary under the conservation. I presuming that they know more about it than I do, and wanted that to happen. It was in the, we knew it was going to happen. Filling the land up to the level of the street, that was in the drawings. We recognized that's the contour that we're getting to, that they will eventually get to, and it does contour to your lot. I mean, none of this is really new. It's just, it's being realized. the number of trees that were left to be left on the lot. They were quite expressive about that large beech, I think it was, that they thought they could retain.
Doesn't make any sense.
And
This is allowed.
yeah, no, I understand, but they,
Watched them trim the bottom.
I understand.
That thing and just basically killed the tree in the middle of it.
I do understand, and
Don't trim
candidly, if I were the owner of the property, I would be a little concerned with my contractor having done that, because I would have been looking at that tree as being a positive, pre-existing landscaping feature that I would not want to have had lost. Again, their ultimate goal is to make something that's attractive for sale. It may not be what we're used to in that area. It's not going to be single-family homes, that sort of thing. We tried to limit development here. We tried to, the town fought, the idea of a 40B on this parcel because of the environmental nature of it. We really have done everything we can to get to not be where we are, but where we are is a function of state law and the courts. And, Bob has interceded when advised, and again, I'm hearing that the early morning and late visits of heavy equipment hasn't been happening since Thanksgiving. I know that's only 2 weeks, but
Well, I mean, since the water's been, they haven't done a lot of work there, but Monday.
it might be coincidental to Bob's visit to them, but it may also be consequential of Bob's visit to them. If it is consequential to Bob's visit to them, we can hope that continues, they continue to abide by what's expected. If they don't, letting Bob know would put him in a position to be able to reinforce to them that it's not going to be allowed. And there are consequences that can be brought forward. So communicating is good, but being understanding is, it's going to be a construction site. There's nothing we can do about that.
I understand that, from a residential, would we accept some noise, even from neighbors and stuff, but the amount of noise that this place is
It is a big construction site.
Is there any mitigation for the noise, for
Nope.
any barriers or anything? or-
The trees were supposed to be the barriers.
Yeah.
No, I do appreciate that, but I do want to, and I'm not trying to minimize the annoyance and everything else. That plan never said that all those trees were going to stay. That plan had most of the trees disappearing. The plan had the big beech staying and then planting a number of trees for mitigating purposes after the fact. It was a huge amount of trees to be planted.
All the trees were along Martha's on the print stays.
I'd have to go back and, I'd have to go back and look at it
They were
specifically.
very clear in the application, in certain presentations of the landscape diagram, that was proposed, that it would depend upon site conditions. To the extent they told you folks something that they're not carrying through on, that is what it is. But in terms of the application that we were able to hold them to, much of the landscape diagram was for illustrative purposes only, and not necessarily something that we could hold them to. There are shading trees that are required under the application of the permit, but they're not required right now. They're required when the project is complete.
The entrance, when this is all said and done, and where the people drive in and out that will be living there, is that entrance still the same?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I was only concerned because of the construction entrance being directly across from our house. I wish they had never put it right there. They could have moved it, well, there's two entrances, but they use the one.
Where the other one is, right opposite me.
Yes.
That's the final plan.
Yes, because I know the entrance right across from us they use the most, and it's just like, sometimes it drives me crazy that they can't use the other entrance more, because it's always like, it's right there. It's right, like, because when I'm pulling in and out of my driveway, when they are working, the days that they are working, there's always one of those big trucks pulling in and out, and that truck's not gonna let me go, all right? Cut this twice the school bus has been cut off. Just saying, like, it's not like, oh, look, a neighbor trying to pull out, let her go. No, that truck's going because it's working, and it's, you know, I'm just saying, so I was like, oh, please do not tell me that they're gonna change the entrance to, you know, in the final stage, because that would be, you know, to have people coming and going all
The
the time.
plan,
right
they,
in front
they
of
have
us.
not come before us for a modification of the plan. The plan
Okay,
is what
all right.
was approved.
Got that.
Also, usually during snowstorms, what they do is they park at the top of Martha's Lane, the trucks, like the GC or whoever. And Martha's Lane is a private road, so they shouldn't be parking on it. And then what they do is they walk down in front of the fence in front of 5 Martha's Lane to access the fence and everything, because they're all snow plowed in down there. I think that's, might be the guy going to check the pump or whatever, but he shouldn't be parking on Martha's Lane. So, the inspector can talk to the GC.
I will certainly talk to him. I mean, ultimately, what you described is a police matter. But, you know, we certainly can talk to him.
Yes, ma'am.
Sandra Kingsland, 21 Martha's Lane. I want to follow up with what Mr. Burrows said about the huge pond in the back, because, again, if for insurance purposes, somebody might want to ask, not tell, or tell them to ask, whoever they need to have something put around that big pond, because just the front where the fencing is in the front, that's not going to stop anyone from walking around to the back. And there are times when you do see people walking way over on the railroad tracks, and somehow you can get onto the property this way, and anyone who wants to check out that water, it's right there on their property, they can check it out. It's a really dangerous situation for any person. I'm just saying.
I'm only suggesting that it,
relay this to.
but it might also be a little disingenuous. I mean, it's a pond, it's a man-made pond that wasn't there before, I understand, and it's standing water, but it's also next to a marsh. And
on private
property that they're trespassing if they go there.
I'm not aware of a regulation or requirement that standing water be fenced in. I understand that. It's certainly a request you can make of your neighbor, but there are plenty of unintended many or not so many ponds in Situate, and I'm not aware of a requirement that landowners fence them in. Maybe there should be a requirement. I'm just not aware of one. I understand your concern.
Just more concerned with the machines that are backing over a child and stuff, even though they have kids are curious.
I understand, but to Ed's point, it's a construction site. We gotta keep our kids out of there. It's not an ideal location for a construction site.
But can you make note too, I don't know if they could put that privacy screen back up, like I said, it's been laying on the ground for about a month, and maybe pick up their trash that's blowing against 5 Martha's Lane, just makes the site look disgraceful.
I'll get to them on that tomorrow.
I mean, hopefully that.
It just seems like there's no one there.
Blow on the
Well, I think the
school bus when it
weather's,
drives by.
the weather's kind of working against them, you know, the last few weeks or so.
Yeah, but it's been down for at least a month.
Yeah, it's also kind of an awkward time in the project's life, because once they get actually under construction, there'll be a trailer on site, there'll be a superintendent and other people in that trailer all the time. They haven't gotten there yet, but they're likely to be there before, I would say, within the next month or two. So there's going to be a supervisory presence on site all the time that work is going on at some point in the sort of development of the project. And that point's coming up fairly soon.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, the Toll Brothers project is somewhat illustrative of what we're talking about. When that initial clearing took place, when the initial infrastructure was going in, it was a much more active, dynamic site. Now that they're building the buildings, it's, it may not be aesthetically, people may still feel uncomfortable that it isn't still woods, but the construction activity is far less impactful than it was the initial part of it. So we're going to look at that same kind of a cycle.
And hopefully you guys, we're not saying that, oh, it's going to get better, which is why we're not doing anything. We
We're just
can't
saying this-
stop them from constructing the project. That's the issue. We can't, they're allowed to construct it in a place that, albeit may be a ridiculous place to construct such a project. Sir?
About the green tarp thing, I think if anyone wanted to let them know, it'd be a good idea to put it on the inside of the project, not the outside, so it doesn't blow into the street again.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Probably. Wind probably comes off the water. That's
Yep.
probably a very good idea.
What is the point about the tree? I mean, the roots extended pretty far, and I'm pretty sure as soon as you put more than a couple feet of fill over the roots, the tree's gonna die anyway, so I'm pretty sure we all kind of assumed that the tree was going, even though it was on the plan. I have one more question. Back, like, over a year ago when the project was from the 48 to the 60 units, I think Jeff Engler said that one of the reasons why he did it was, like, so he could be there every step of the way. I was just wondering, because I saw in the newspaper the 2 properties were sold. Is he, like, gone now? Do any of you know? Like, it's not like I miss him, but, like, I
The
just
entity-
wonder if he's gone.
A separate entity has been created to own the properties in, the ownership is still with the same group of people.
Yeah, the principals
It's
are
just-
still involved.
The holding
Just for
company.
It's a holding company for legal and tax purposes, that this is a project owned by this company and another project is, the overall ownership is the same people.
But still Jeff Engler, it's still Jeff
That's-
Engler?
Yes. You don't have to change the picture on your dartboard, yeah.
No, just curious. Just curious.
It's just a shame. He spoke a very good game during the process, and he's not holding up any of his
Yeah.
promises. I
We
mean, I
all
know
knew, we all knew it was gonna be.
he was right over there. He lied directly right to my face. So I don't trust anything he says. It's a shame, because it could be a good working relationship. We've been trying to be patient, but
I certainly don't mean to say that they've carried through with everything that they said, but also to a certain extent, I would implore you to not give up on that relationship yet. This is the absolute most disturbing time of the project. Hold them to what they said, absolutely. Don't give up on the relationship yet. The construction process will get better, it will get less disturbing. That's really it. Sir?
I mean, apropos to this meeting, special permitting a sign, I think you can hear from my neighbors and myself, we have absolutely no reason to trust this entity to follow through with what they say. So I would urge you to be as specific as possible with whatever special permit you give them, because other than that, we have no grounds on which to argue.
We shall be.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Because we still have, we still have to talk about the size of this sign, right? What do we think?
Well, a couple of things. I do think it's important that we know specifically where it's going to be. So
Yep.
I think it shouldn't be any big trick to get
Plan
Plan
mark
and
for where the location of the sign is.
It could be drawn on as far as I'm concerned, it could be drawn on the back of a matchbook. Just show me some sites and it's going to be there, but it doesn't, I'm not looking at anything extraordinary.
I would also want to see the construction, although you're not permitting the construction, we would have to give it a building permit.
Yes.
But at some point, we're going to have to know how it's built, what the footings look like, that sort of thing.
Right. And in terms of what's presented here, 4 feet off the ground on a 5-foot tall sign, 4 feet starting 4 feet off the ground and 12 feet wide. That's fine, but I'm also thinking if I were building it, it's not like it's 20 feet off the street or, 50 feet away from the street. I'm not sure you need that big a sign for for people who are interested in the site as an information sign. I'm thinking of the sign at Situate Woods or what on Stockbridge Road.
Yes.
I think that's maybe a 4x8 sign. It's not as big as this.
No.
And I don't think the signs at Toll Brothers are as big as this.
No, they aren't.
This is huge.
I would,
And it's for
I would,
temporary-
And to be honest,
I would-
the height isn't necessarily okay with me. That's 9 feet.
That's huge.
I
That's a
would,
basketball.
That, the
I would
height
rec-
is tall.
yeah, I would recommend that in making a drawing, a site drawing, construction, what do the footings look like, what's it going to be made out of, it should, you should consider what those sites are. Are you familiar with where they are in town, or?
The signs that you're referencing?
Yeah, as a reference point, no, these sites I just mentioned, Stockbridge Road,
I'm not familiar with those signs. No.
okay, and the
Probably
Toll
figure
Brothers
them out.
project is on Hadley Road
And Tilden.
and Tilden.
Okay, yeah.
If you could see those two sites, Stockbridge
Okay.
Road is right around the corner from your property. It's go down to Greenbush, and it's on the other side of the tracks from from Countryway.
Okay.
I feel like the Toll
Virgin
Brothers were
Toll.
like 4x6 or something.
And if
It
you looked at,
sounds more about right.
you looked at those three sites and
I think
considered
they're
them,
20 square feet.
I think so.
I think
too.
they're probably about 20 square feet. They probably meet
That's the B or C,
B,
B.
710.2B, and I think they'd meet your needs. And if they don't meet your needs and you're looking for relief from B, some consideration from B, I'd just like to have a better idea of what that is.
Okay.
And I think, I understanding the location of the sign, I mean, if depending on site conditions, you want to put it 10 yards on this side of the entrance or that side of the entrance, I'm not sure I care much about that. I do care about how far
Off the street.
back it is set from the street.
Okay.
And I think we might as well be exact about that, or is it near, you encounter a big rock, I think we need a no closer than number. We certainly need that if it's gonna be larger than 20 square feet.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly where it is in the left or right.
It could be either place, but I think it should be defined where.
Yeah, we should know.
If they want two options,
Right.
either here or there.
Yeah.
And you're not going out with a tape measure to get you down to the nearest 6 inches, but,
Well, I would presume, unless they want to relocate the existing construction fence, this can't be any farther away from the street than the fence. It's
And how
gotta be
close is the
in front
fence?
of that. It's pretty close. I would say from the pavement, 8 feet.
Because
10 feet.
this all started when they mentioned that they wanted to put up signage on the fence.
Right.
And then I think I mentioned, if it's allowed under the code without a permit, it's allowed. If it's not, you have to come before us.
Right.
And then here we are. And so now this looks more like a freestanding sign.
Yeah, that's gonna be a freestanding sign.
But-
It might be the height to avoid the fence. So you got a fence in front, and then you've got 4 feet above that for where the sign starts.
you want to put it behind the
You
fence.
don't
You wanna put it
You don't
beh-
want to do that.
No.
That's
gonna
that's
put
not
it,
a good idea.
12 feet up in the air.
Yeah, the fence is
before-
pretty tall.
Yeah, it's,
Um,
I would assume it's
But
more or
I
less contiguous with the fence in terms of height,
think,
right next to it, but.
yeah. I think what we need is, we need to know exactly where the sign's gonna go. At least, we need to, well, the building department, at least eventually, will need to have a better understanding of what it's
Constructed from.
made out of. I think we'd like to have an understanding of this,
Yeah,
the material.
my guess is it's PVC on the side with some sort
Yeah.
of wood.
Yeah, I mean, there's a board that they typically do signs on, but the other thing is, I would say that this is big enough so that it's gonna act like a sail, so it's got structural
Gonna have to have some
issues.
girth to it.
It's gonna have to have some kind of supporting framework that it will
But-
withstand that.
But I
Especially
think,
depending where it's located.
Yeah.
Closer to the street,
Right.
that thing can't tip.
but
Right.
I think, to Ed's point, it's obviously it's a unique project. You're asking for much larger than the code permits. I'm not sure we're saying now that you definitely can't have it. I think to the extent you need much larger than the code permits, we'd like to understand why.
So this, okay, this
Lo-
size is
Location,
between C and
structure,
B.
and why does it have to be this big?
It's not C. In my mind, it's not
Directional
C.
sign?
No. It's definitely a for sale sign.
Yeah, it's
not- as you
it's not
describe
for
it.
the purpose of telling people where the project is, you're putting it right in front of the project.
And
At the
again,
same time, it doesn't make much sense that you're allowed to have a 100-foot sign to say where something is and only a 20-foot sign to say that it's for sale, but
Well, it does make sense in the sense that I can think of the signs that qualify under C. What was the Golden Rooster, I guess it's the River
River Club.
There's one on Hollitt Street, there's one out on 3A. There's the directional sign for the merchants of the business district in North Situate.
The Barker
as- To the
Tavern, one
degree
down
that
at
it
the bottom of
exists.
the
The
Hadley
Barker
Road.
Tavern at the bottom
Right.
of Hadley Road. Yeah, those are the ones that fit under C. They're not at the property, they're a distance from the property, and they're giving direction to it. This doesn't fit that model. So you're looking for relief from B, or simply you're looking for a minimum of special permit under B. And if you're looking for any relief from B, I'd need to know why. Granted, and as the chairman said, because it's a 40B, we may be hamstrung, we might have to grant that.
I might be more inclined to be willing to go over that, but to be honest, if it needs to be bigger than 20 square feet, shouldn't it be the fence? If we're gonna give you some form of relief on this, why not make the fence the sign? There's already a structure there. You're
potentially
putting
have a
up
screen on-
screening,
yeah.
can't you print on the green
print,
screening
But
that
then
you put
I
up?
think you potentially have the same problem that's been alluded to with the screening material blowing off.
Make
and
it
it's already
impervious or
blowing
tie it
up.
on, make it pervious or tie it on better. This is not,
Put vent flaps.
yeah, we've
Yeah, I'm looking
people
at
have overcome this before. Yeah, you guys are gonna do the work to go back and get more specifics about the sign. I'm willing to just tell you now and save us all some time. I think the only way I can see myself considering saying, yeah, these guys should have a sign larger than the 20 feet that the code allows, is if it's the
Screen
same as
sign
the
on
fence. Even then, we wanna know why you need it. We wanna, if this is what it looks like, great. We wanna understand the size, exactly where it is on the fence, what it's made out of, how you're going to achieve it. But the idea of having the fence there that close to the road in a residential neighborhood that these folks have to look at, and then adding a sign that's separate, that's bigger than the 20 feet, seems like a lot to me.
Okay.
Additionally, the question of duration, I can understand if the project is as the project develops, I think I'd like to see the sign relocate more on the property as circumstances allow. I would want to do it maybe a 6-month duration.
That's what I was thinking.
With a renewal, we have to you have to be allowed to have a sign, in my mind, it's for sale, I mean, you have to do that, but as the project develops, perhaps we would ask you to relocate the sign, and maybe design the sign so it could be put more appropriately on the lot. Once you have the infrastructure in, you have the drive, and the building's being built, if I'm looking at that property, I'd like to see the sign on the property, in the drive area, not out in the street. And I think the neighbors would probably be happier if it was on the property. I can drive in the driveway, I can take a look at the sign, I can get the information off it and drive back out. I don't need a billboard.
So, okay, in the event, yeah, that once the infrastructure is in place,
that the
Could you
sign
then
would,
qualify a
the sign
sign
could migrate onto the
directional
property.
sign in the event the infrastructure's in place to direct people to the entrance of the property?
The entrance of the property is real clear. You can, if you want to come to us for permission to have a C sign on private property in a residential district a mile from the property that someone allows you to put there, then we can consider that.
Right.
But I wouldn't waste my money, looking for that opportunity. This property is not hidden. It's not, doesn't need direction. It's on a state highway. It's right there. It's going to be right in the view line of,
Right.
So, you just need a for sale sign. You need information about how to market the property, or how the property is being marketed, and that's a B.
Okay.
710.2B, and I think it should be probably I would model it after those two parcels that I've already mentioned, that I don't find their signs terribly offensive. I know that they're there because I've seen them, but I don't. Has anyone, do you have any insights, Stockbridge Road or Toll Brothers signs? I mean, I have seen them, and they don't stand out in my mind because they aren't this.
It might be bigger than 20 square feet.
They're not that big.
They're not that
If they're
big.
4x8, they're bigger. That'd be 30, but.
Right, and,
An
yeah,
enormous project, you can just.
A 4x8 sheet of plywood is 32 feet.
Yeah.
I can see that maybe, that's a reasonable, that's bigger than 20, but it's not 60.
and again, right now, that surface area is here. It's your construction fence. Let's hopefully use it when we decide where this sign is going.
Seems to be a better alternative than.
And, yeah, I mean, the idea of putting a sign this big any closer to the road than the fence is not a good idea in my mind.
I
Yeah.
move to continue this to our next meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Do you have I guess while unbang that gavel, you have a good understanding of what we're looking for?
So we're gonna look for location on a plan, construction, materials, and we're gonna talk duration, which is to be 6 months, and then we're gonna have a plan 2, which is potentially a sign that is on the fence, what its material is.
Right.
And those are
And in
the,
both instances, size.
Yeah.
size, yeah.
You guys are gonna come back to us with a hopefully smaller sign and a better understanding of why it needs to be as big as you were asking for it to be.
And in the event that it's on the fence, you would seem to be fine with a larger sign than the.
Than if it wasn't on the fence.
Right,
But
That
not-
was me.
But not this sign.
Yeah.
but not this. sign.
Yeah,
Smaller than the presented, but potentially bigger than the.
Again, you'd have to tell us
Qualified
why
as
it
a-
needed to be bigger than 20 feet. If you, 20 square feet. If you, as I just said, a 4x8 sheet of plywood have to, we want 4x8 sheet of plywood because we don't have to cut it. Okay, fine, that's a good argument. Now,
Okay.
tell me, but,
Yeah.
um,
I can't tell you that we're gonna approve any sign if it's on the fence that's bigger. We're not gonna make that commitment now.
I'm more likely to approve a sign if it's on the fence.
Okay.
but
The
I'm.
fence is already there.
So come with ideas.
Now we're just talking about what the fence looks like.
And the
Signs
door-
a new structure closer to the street.
And I would advocate that I would be seeking the board's approval for a 6-month permitting,
Duration.
renewable, by coming before us with what's the next 6 months look like. Basically, as the project develops, can the sign be relocated? And taking into consideration a design that could be relocated without tremendous effort would be, you're not looking to create a permanent structure. But, 18 months is an awful long time to have it in one spot, if a better spot could be had.
And in hindsight, I guess, shame on all of us, shame on me for not thinking of it and the developer. The advertising signs should have been part of the application in hindsight, right? This is a large rental building.
Yeah.
Obviously, they need some signs.
Need to advertise.
We should have figured that out at the point of the application.
They may want to have a permanent sign of some sort,
Yeah.
but that would probably be under 20 square feet.
Next time I permit a 50-unit building in a marsh, I'll make sure we cover that.
Hopefully there won't be another time.
Great, agreed.
Likely.
And so.
Yeah. All right,
All
so
right.
with that,
Clear direction.
thank you.
Thank you.
January.
16th, I think?
January 16th.
20th?
Yeah.
16th.
Right.
January
I was gonna say,
16th.
no, I scheduled my vacation with that in mind.
The
No.
butters won't get a notification of any continuance. This is
It won't be in the paper.
this is your notification.
You won't get a notice in the mail.
No, so you're not re-noticed, so
You
it
notice at
is.
the first meeting, and then they're continued.
This meeting has been
16th.
continued till the 16th of January
Right.
at this location.
So it will be on that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have any minutes? And then I have one, just a point of order. We've gotten a couple of applicants' councils have submitted decisions. And in 2 instances, I think, that I sent back comments to you, the decisions where the applicant's attorney states the findings, they go a little far with the findings, in my opinion, and I've lined some of those out. We find, if the code raises a requirement, we find as to that requirement. If we're doing a Gale decision, we find as to Gale. We don't find, under this most recent one, that the watershed or the subject to flooding rule maps are ridiculous, which is basically what they said without ruling ridiculous. And the board found that they compared it to Front Street and it didn't make any sense. Like, no, we didn't. We may have discussed some of that, but that doesn't belong in the decision,
That's
in my
not a
opinion.
finding. They can say
Yeah,
that it was.
so
They can say that a contributing, they considered the
Right, and
circumstances
so-
on Front Street in their finding.
Right. I want to be careful what we're putting our names on in terms of our commentary in a recorded decision. So I've clawed a little bit of that back. I'm only mentioning that here in case you guys have something to add or say as opposed to that. Didn't want to just do it in private.
No, I think for the public, viewing public,
So many of you out there.
when a proposed draft decision is drafted by a member of the board or by outside counsel, it's circulated by the secretary to all of us, and we do not have the opportunity to discuss it even in an email chain, because that would be essentially a meeting. So we can only refer back to the secretary that yes, we agree with this, or I have challenges with this component, and then she would circulate out that here's a red line from Anthony or whatever. So this is where we can have that discussion as a board, that if we have concerns about the findings as drafted by, or a decision as drafted by a board member or outside counsel, this is the kind of.
Even though I went back through the open meeting law and confirmed that even us all discussing together via email to confirm what was or wasn't found in a motion or what was or wasn't said in a meeting for accuracy is not a violation of the open meeting law. Newly discussing what to put in it, different.
Right.
All right. Here we go. With that,
Make a motion?
motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Every seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We,
I have a question.
sure. Is it we adjourned.
No,
Let's-
it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, we'll just, are we done? We off?
I can.
Yeah, we're all
Oh, we're
done.
off. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. You want to tell dirty jokes and sing holiday carols.
Having eggnog.
So the one
Are
that is-
we off now?
Yeah, I think so.
Can we be sure? Take your time to be sure. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
There you go.
Yeah.
Definitely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The one that you redlined and sent back to me today.
Yep.
Do I recirculate that when you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, you redlined, he redlined.
I think
one.
I copied everybody.
Yeah, and I
Oh, you did, okay.
I think he probably
I
replied just to
responded
you.
to you that I was comfortable with Anthony's red line.